take your agenda design to the next level with the right tools. Hey, in this video, I'm going to explore the essential tools that I use to create agendas that foster collaboration and experiential learning. We're going to look at Session Lab. We're going to look at some other game-changing tools. I'm going to demonstrate to you a 3-step process I use of conversation selection, timing, and choreography matching. And we're going to dive into the best practices and techniques to help you create really engaging experiences for your learners and participants that really get the results you're looking for. Whether you're a seasoned facilitator or just starting out, this video is perfect for really anyone looking to elevate their events through proper agenda design. So, what are you waiting for? Let's get going. I'm going to show you how the pros do it. Real quick, my name is Josh Friberg, and I am a certified Xchange guide. And what that means is that we focus on releasing collective wisdom at speed and scale. We do this by creating experiential learning. If you're interested in that, in growing yourself or learning how to design events that create that, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Well, as I mentioned, I'm going to be showing you how I design an agenda, and I'm going to be doing it for real because I have an event coming up soon in Alaska, an event I'm going to be doing called the Execution Strategy Cycle for the Alaska Association of Realtors. And I'm going to show you the real process that I use and the actual tools that I really love that help me create those great experiences of connection and collaboration that allow people to tap into their strengths, to their ideal images of the future, and to make bold decisions that lead to real action. I'm going to show you some of the tools that I use, whether they be analog or digital, and we're going to finish with an actual designed agenda, or at least first draft of it, and you'll be ready to get started on designing your next agenda. Agenda design is one of the most critical steps in really facilitating a great event, because we may have the right audience, we may have the right content, but ultimately we have to craft the experience for folks. And so the place that I always start and the tool that I use to get started is really a simple one. You've probably guessed it if you've hung around me for very long. It's going to be a brightly colored large Post-it note and a Sharpie. And the reason that I love these tools is because it's very visceral and tactical. I'm probably a bit of a kinesthetic learner, and so that helps me. The other thing is that there are constraints brought in by the size of the piece of paper that we're using and the size of the marker that we're using. It forces me to do less and do it better. And so my encouragement is always to be looking to find ways to create maybe less volume of content, but go a little bit deeper in it and create more experiential learning around it. Well, let me show you how I get started. So I start with this simple Post-it note. I've divided it in half, and on the first half of the page, I'm going to ask this question: what conversation do we want to have? Okay, most of the time, we have a tendency to start with what content do we want to have? And when we think about what content we want to have, in this case, I'm working with real estate agents who are smart and successful, and yet sometimes struggle to get things done. And so they're going to want to talk about how to actually go about executing. Here's the thing. If I told them everything that I know or everything that I've learned about that topic, to do it justice, it's going to take 10 hours. And guess what? Nobody, including me, wants to hear me talk for 10 hours about this topic. And here's the other thing. If I just talked at them for 10 hours, for 2 hours, for 1 hour, well, the learning wouldn't really happen. That's not how adult learners learn. They learn through conversation. They learn through doing things and reflecting on the experience of it. This is what we call experiential learning. And so what we want to do is not think of all the things we could say as subject matter experts, but instead ask the question, what conversations do we want to have? On the other side of the page, what I'm going to do is I'm actually already going to start thinking through my timing for this event. Now, for this event in particular, what I know is that it's going to start at 9 a.m. and it has to be concluded by 11:30. By 11:30, all right? And so what I like to do is then just put in those markers of 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock and start thinking about how I'm going to block this even as I get started. Now, a couple things. One that I already know in advance is that if we're going to end at 11:30, we need to have a nice 15-minute conclusion or closing. And in particular, we're going to talk about making sure that we close with heart. We close with heart. Because with this topic, we're going to tend to spend a lot of time in our head. We want to make sure we end with heart, right? That we end with that kind of emotional side, because that's actually going to equip people to take action. Now, you might be thinking, Josh, what if this is like, people who don't like living in their heart? It doesn't matter. Even your most analyticals, your people who tend to live in their head, are still driven by emotion and decision, and so we want to end by closing with heart. The other thing that I know is that in this particular event, there's going to be a conversation about how they could work with me after the event. There's an opportunity for them to sign up for one-on-one business coaching with me, something like that. And so we call this, at least in my notes, I'm going to call this selling. And so I know that block has to be there before I even get started. Now, I know you might be thinking, weren't we going to talk about what conversations? Yeah, we are, but we have a constraint of time. And so we need to know already in advance what constraints we're working with. Because these are real estate agents, they have a tendency to have a casual relationship with time. And so while some people, I might be able to get away with like a 5-minute introduction, I know with these folks it's going to require a 10-minute intro. And so before I move into my next, whatever the next conversation is, I know that's not going to start until about 9:10. All right, so we have some of our constraints already built in. Let's talk about what conversations that we want to have. So based on the marketing that we sent out ahead of time, I do know some of the conversations that we need to have to keep up with our promise of the flyers that went out, that sort of thing. So the first conversation I want to have is about their strengths and images of the future, right? Images of the future. And so this is going to be a great conversation where we're going to talk about, rather than being like deficit based, where we say, hey, what's broken, what's not working, how do we fix it? We're going to talk about strengths and how we can double down on those. And so this is a really fun, important conversation. Now in advance, I'm actually already thinking about the choreography that I'm going to match with this. But for now, we're just going to hold that conversation in that place, because what we're going to do next is build on another conversation. And that conversation is the one that the class is titled off of, which is the execution strategy cycle. And so I know I want to make sure we spend a lot of time on this. Not sure exactly how much time to spend on it yet. There's going to be a brief teaching on what the mechanics of the execution strategy cycle, and then I want them to actually have a chance to practice it. And so I'll be thinking through what choreography or conversation design I want to use around that topic. But this is the topic that we'll cover. And then the third one, which is going to be kind of optional, it'll depend a little bit on how much time we have. I may decide in advance to put it into the agenda, or I may make a game day decision based on how things are going. And this is called, this one's called in removing barriers. Removing barriers to success. It's a cool conversation. There's a couple different sub conversations we could have about that. One is called Quit Your Way to Success. The other one is called Learning to Say No. This one we might do because there's a really fun, fast, energizing game we can do around that one. And so these are kind of the beginnings of the conversations that we want to make sure that we have. Okay, so that's step one. right? We've selected our conversations that we want to make sure we have as part of it. Now, I do have teaching modules that go along with this. They're very short, often only about 7 to 10 minutes. What we're learning about the attention spans of adults in North America right now is they're short and getting shorter, right? Short and getting shorter. And so we not only have to change conversations a lot, we have to change modalities a lot. And so what I will do is leave the lecture time, the passive consumption portion, as short as I can, often only 7 to 10 minutes at a time. Only like 7 to 10 minutes at a time. And then what I'm going to do from there is move people immediately into a conversation, choreography. We're going to talk about this in a few minutes, that will guide them into exploring that topic more deeply. Now that I've selected those, now I'm going to get a little bit deeper into the timing. So one of the things before we even get into this, the introduction is going to have really 3 important parts to it that I call the 3 S's. This comes out of, I learned this from John Berghoff at Xchange. And the 3 S's are style. I'm going to actually talk to them about the style of how they're going to learn. It's going to be, the second S is going to be the substance. This is what the actual topics we're going to be covering are. So I'll give them a broad agenda. And then the third one, the third S, is sell. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for permission that if I do a great job, provide a ton of value, is it okay if I take a few minutes and share with you how you could maybe hire me as a one-on-one business coach at the end of this event? And so that's the 3 S's. We're going to do that as part of the intro. And of course, that will give them the topic and the explanation of what we're talking about today. Immediately after that, I know that I want to move into a purpose question, a purposeful connection, where we ask a question like, why is it important to you that we discuss this execution strategy cycle, that we lean into your strengths and images of the future, that we talk about executing on the actions you know you should do, and then we talk about removing barriers. The reason I want to move into a purposeful connection right away is to change the posture of the room. A lot of people come into our learning experiences with their arms crossed and say, hey, why should I learn from you? What do you got, right? When we instead ask them, hey, why are you here? Why is it important for you to engage fully? Why is it important for you to bring your full self to this? Why is it important for you to leave this room in 2.5 hours better than you were when you got here? All of that is connected to their purpose. I'm going to have 40 people in the room. Guess what? I have 40 distinct purposes or reasons or whys for being there. So we're going to start with purposeful connection. The next thing that I'm going to do, and I know that this conversation is going to take at least 20 minutes, right? So we won't start our next conversation until 9:30, right? 9:30. So we'll have that purpose connection. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move into the strengths and images of the future. I have a few different ideas of what I will talk about. I think it's going to be about 10 minutes. And then we're going to probably put them into, we're probably all told going to need to have this conversation until about 10:30. Until about 10:30. And so that might include a choreography, I think, on diving deeper into this topic. Yeah, I think that'll be a good amount. Yeah, maybe 10:15. Call it 10:15. At 10:15, then we're going to switch to the execution strategy cycle, right? And I think that all told, we're going to want to be in this activity for 30 minutes. So we'll do at 10:45. Then we're going to talk about, with only 15 minutes, we're probably going to talk about how to say no. Okay, how to say no. And that'll be a pretty good broad agenda. So you can see there, now I've blocked it out. I kind of have a sense that, we're going to, whole opening with purpose conversation is going to take about a half an hour. We'll spend 45 minutes on this conversation, 30 minutes on this one, and 15 minutes on that one. So that's a pretty good agenda. And then we'll go into selling and closing. Yeah, so that'll be a great time spent there. So I've completed the first 2 steps, right? I've talked about what we're going to talk about. We've selected the conversations. Now I've gotten kind of the broad timing. Here's where things get exciting and we really start designing the agenda. And this is one of my absolute favorite tools. I use this for every event that I design, whether it's just for an hour, for 3 days. It's the best tool that I have, and this is called Session Lab. Session Lab, they've been doing some great work on helping speakers and facilitators design great agendas. And so I'm going to start by going right up here to create session. I'm going to create a blank session right here. This is going to pop up just a blank session. So you can see this is untitled, and we're going to retitle it the Execution Strategy Cycle. There it is. I have an introduction here. I'm probably going to come back and fill this in. I also like to color code these, and I know this one is going to be an energizer and icebreaker. I'm going to have to come in with a lot of energy when I start this session. Now, the next thing that I know I'm going to do is I'm going to have a purpose conversation, and there's a couple ways I could do this. I could create a blank block and begin to type all the words into it that are going to create that. Or what I'm going to really enjoy doing is I'm going to pull a method from the library. Over here, I have a ton of methods available to me. And in fact, I have access to a couple of exclusive libraries, including this one from the Xchange Guide Certification Program. This is the great 12-week course created by Xchange to become a certified Xchange guide. By the way, if you ever have questions about that, please reach out to me. I'd love to share with you how you can become a certified Xchange guide, or several of the different programs we have that can help you become an expert at facilitating these types of meetings. What I'm going to do down here is I know I want to grab this Xchange Connect choreography. It's as simple as me clicking use method, and then guess what? Now I have that method in my agenda. It's already set for 20 minutes. I'm going to change the color coding on it. I want to call this an exercise. And then up here at the top, I know that this is going to be a connection to purpose around one question. And the question is going to be, why is it important that you choose to be here today? This will be a great question. I also have access to a slide deck that's going to, where I have all the instructions already pre-created to show people. I'll be able to put the question into that slide deck, and that'll be real easy. So far, we've gotten ourselves through the first 30 minutes. And so now I'm going to add another block, and you'll remember that the next conversation that we want to have is about creating those, or talking about our strengths and our images of the future. Now, I remember that I taught a class a year ago where I did this little section, this little 10-minute section called Why, Who, How, What. Why, Who, How, What. Yep. And I really like this one. I think I'm going to use this one. And so what I can do within Session Lab is I can actually come right over here to the side, and I can copy this to a different event. I can simply click copy the block, and I can go right into this event called Execution Strategy Cycle. So we've copied it right in, and when I go back and when I go back to this event, you can see there it is, already copied over. I'm going to make a few changes to this. We'll probably get rid of that. I'm going to color code this as theory. This is what I'm going to be doing. Whenever I see this blue, I know this is where it's just going to be passive consumption for my audience. And that'll be great, but I want to make sure I keep it tight. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another method from the library. And this one I'm going to use the interview choreography right here. So I'll just click use method like that. I can assign this to be an exercise. Now, this one by default is set up for an hour, but of course I have freedom as a facilitator to change that. And we don't have that kind of time. We don't have that kind of time for this. And so we do have until 10:15. And so what I can do is I know that that is only going to allow for about 35 minutes. I'll put that in. And now we're ready to move into our next block. So our next block goes right here. I'm just going to add a block. And this block, we're going to do just a few minutes. And this is going to be on the execution strategy cycle. Execution strategy cycle. I'm going to keep that to just 10 minutes of insight or theory. And then with this particular practice, we're going to do a block that I don't have a pre-created choreography for. And so I'm going to have to create one. But I know that it's going to take 20 minutes because we want to end by 10:45 on this. And that exercise, we're going to call it right here. This exercise is going to be called role-playing accountability. So within the teaching that I'm going to do on the execution strategy cycle, there's an accountability conversation that's scripted. And I'm going to give them a chance to actually role-play that accountability. The last block that the last 3 blocks that we're going to include are going to be 15 minutes for, well, I should really technically call this, we're going to just do 15 minutes as an exercise and a conversation. So it's actually going to be like a discussion debriefing. It's the best way to categorize it. And this is called How to Say No. We're going to give people a chance to actually practice saying no 2 different ways. That's a fun exercise. Then we'll move into, for now, we're going to call this Sell for now. I'm going to make that 15 minutes long. And then we're going to end with Close with Heart. I actually think I have an example of a block somewhere in another event that I did, but we'll definitely call this one Discussion and Debriefing. Yeah, we'll call it Energizer because it ends with a lot of energy. The Sell we'll call Theory, or maybe we could call it Instructions. That's fine too. But now you can see I have the basics of this. I'm going to go back in and fill this all in and type it all in. But that's the essentials for me of how I design an agenda. Now, what's cool about Session Lab is I can also share this with any of the collaborators that I'm working with. They could either have read-only privileges, or they could also be people who are creating those some of those blocks or typing things in. There's also the ability to add notes, add, attachments to every one of those pieces, to have parking lots of stuff that you may or may not choose to use within the event. This is great to use when I have an event, like a 3-day conference with a bunch of speakers, where I could be collaborating with them in real time. The other cool thing is if we ever need to change anything, let me maybe just show you this real quick. Whoop, wrong one. If I ever need to change anything, say I go, oh gosh, our speaker didn't show up and we need to move this block down to here, right? Well, guess what? I just moved it. All the timings changed accordingly, and super simple. Don't have to, take my spreadsheet and type in all the times or anything like that. It's all just auto-calculated, and I go, oh, that one's too long. I need to steal 5 minutes from here. I just dial up, dial down the times. It's really just a perfect tool for designing fabulous agendas. Agenda design is one of the most important steps for creating and facilitating really great events. This is one of the areas where I recommend a lot more time than you think to think through and create the experience that you want your people to have. There's a 3-step process that I always use. I ask the question, what conversations do I want to have? I think through the timing in a real broad way, and then ultimately I match the choreographies, the different interaction patterns that I have available to me. I match those interaction patterns with the conversations and timing that I want to have to complete the agenda. Hey, if you would like to learn more about how you can elevate your events, whether it's a collaborative meeting, an experiential workshop, or maybe it's a really big event, a 3-day conference, convention, or appreciative inquiry summit, I'd love to talk with you more. Please reach out and see if either working with me is the best fit, or for you yourself learning how to become an expert facilitator through the Xchange approach. I would love to talk with you more. Until then, be thinking really seriously about up-leveling your agenda design. This is how you can elevate your events.